So Keir Starmer has called Britain's new deal with the European Union a win-win for both sides after hosting the first UK-EU summit since Brexit. It's a wide-ranging agreement, and here are some of the new measures. A deal to cut red tape and align standards with the EU to allow more farming and food exports. In return, the EU has been given an extension of its existing fishing quotas, with boats having access to British waters until 2038. There are plans to allow young people to travel, study and work freely between the EU and Britain again. The details and numbers are still to be agreed. And British travellers will be able to use electronic passport e-gates in the EU to reduce queuing time, although this needs to be implemented by individual member states. The Conservatives and Reform UK have both accused the government of surrendering to Brussels. We'll look at the economic impact and also at what it means for the fishing industry. But first,
to this hat-trick of deals, it's our new partnership with the EU that they most want to talk about. And Mr. Speaker, and given their abject failure to strike a deal with India or the US, I can't say I blame them. So let me spell out the benefits of this deal, which gives our country an unprecedented level of access to the EU market. Mr. Speaker, the best access of any nation outside the EU or EFTA, strengthening our national security through our new security and defence partnership. Mr. Speaker, that paves the way for British defence firms to access the EU's €150 billion defence fund. That will support British jobs, British wages, British livelihoods. No more lorry drivers queuing for 16 hours at the border with rotting food in the back. No more needless checks, the inevitable consequence of their policies that made it so much harder to trade, even within our own market, between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The reaction to this deal from business has been absolutely clear. This new partnership has been backed, this isn't the full list, the Federation of Small Businesses, the CBI, the Richest Retail Consortium, Asda, Morrisons, Salmon Scotland, the Food and Drink Foundation, the British Chamber of Commerce, Ryanair, Vodafone, producers of meat, foil and poultry, and on it goes. And I wonder whether that long list of businesses coming out to support this deal will temper the reaction of the Leader of the Opposition in her response. But then again, for weeks now, she's been
In a historic moment that sent shockwaves through Westminster, the Supreme Court delivered a crushing blow to Keir Starmer's covert dealings with the European Union. What began as whispers of quiet realignment exploded into a full-scale constitutional crisis as the highest court in the land exposed a concealed plan to re-anchor the UK to Brussels. Without a single vote in Parliament, the verdict wasn't just a legal slap on the wrist, it was a thunderous rejection, branding the entire scheme as an affront to democracy. For months, documents had been hidden, details buried in bureaucratic language, and public scrutiny avoided at all costs. But in one swift judgment, the veil was lifted. The court didn't just invalidate the plan, it dismantled it, piece by piece, revealing a strategy that could have reshaped the future of Britain without the people ever knowing.
When Labour negotiates, Britain loses. He talks about a hat trick of deals. They are own goals. In 2020, the Conservatives concluded the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the largest and most comprehensive free trade agreement in the world. We agreed to come back in 5 years to improve terms. This renegotiation should have been an opportunity to improve terms for our country. The terms are improved for the EU. And the Prime Minister can dress it up as much as he wants, but he has failed. It is bad for bills, it is bad for jobs, and it is bad for borders. Mr. Speaker, it is very easy to sign deals if you're prepared to give everything away for pennies. This deal locks out our fishermen until 2038. We are now in a worse position than the Faroe Islands, a set of islands with a population of Scarborough, but who get to have annual negotiations. This is a Prime Minister who would pay to give away his family silver. Why is the Prime Minister selling our fishermen down the river? Is it because they don't vote Labour? While British farmers...
And just like that, the silence around Starmer's secret roadmap shattered. Across the country, the mood shifted from quiet suspicion to outright betrayal. What was supposed to be a stealth return to EU alignment now lies in ruins. And Keir Starmer is standing at the centre of the storm. At first glance, it looked like a simple economic agreement. A few regulatory tweaks, some cooperative policy alignments, nothing out of the ordinary. But once the full documents were unearthed, it became clear this was no ordinary deal. Behind the technical jargon was a calculated roadmap to quietly reintroduce EU authority over British affairs. Step by step, legal analysts combing through the fine print found clauses that would have reinstated certain EU court jurisdictions, forced UK compliance with future EU directives, and stripped Parliament of its ability to challenge them. None of it had been debated in the Commons, none of it had been shown to voters. The strategy? Hide the deeper obligations behind trade language, then gradually normalise EU influence until a full return felt inevitable.
British farmers struggle with the family farms tax his Chancellor has imposed on them. Their regulations will now be made in Paris and enforced in Brussels. It is a total capitulation. We're not in the EU. We are not at the table. So can the Prime Minister tell us how is he going to ensure accountability for the hundreds of regulations he has signed this country up to?
The principles we took into the negotiations are clear and simple. Does it drive down bills? Does it drive up jobs? Does it strengthen our borders? And in each case, the answer is resoundingly yes. When it comes...
Worse still, this wasn't a future plan, it was already in motion. Emails, meeting minutes and internal memos traced a clear trail back to Starmer's leadership circle. The intent was never to consult the public. The goal was to bypass them entirely. Now, that entire plan is in ashes. And for Starmer, the fallout is only beginning. As the ruling broke, the reaction across Britain was immediate and fierce. Outside the Supreme Court, crowds formed within hours. Protesters held banners that cut through the legal jargon. Defend Brexit, no EU backdoors, traitors out. Their chants weren't just aimed at Starmer. They were aimed at an entire political class many now see as dangerously out of touch. What made this outrage different was how wide it spread. It wasn't just Leave voters or Reform UK loyalists, it was people who had trusted Labour again, who believed Starmer had accepted Brexit and moved on. Instead, they woke up to find that the party many had cautiously returned to was working in the shadows to undo a national vote. Online spaces exploded. Talk shows were flooded with callers demanding resignations. Small towns and big cities alike saw flash protests break out. Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow and Belfast all filled with angry citizens waving court printouts and Union Jacks. This wasn't just political, it felt personal. A decision millions believed was settled years ago had almost been reversed behind their backs, and that betrayal hit harder than any policy ever could. So how did this entire scheme come crashing down? Not through a press leak, not through opposition research, but through a single insider who refused to stay silent. A civil servant embedded deep within the policy machinery stumbled across early drafts of the EU deal and knew instantly that something was off. Instead of turning a blind eye, they copied portions of the agreement and passed them to a small group of independent journalists. From there, the documents reached a legal watchdog who wasted no time filing for judicial review. That move forced the courts to intervene, and what followed was a 5-week legal brawl that exposed everything. The court proceedings unearthed a paper trail no one in Labour expected to be public. Internal communications showed coordination at the highest levels. Draft legislation had been prepped, legal advisors had flagged red lines, and those warnings were ignored. The courts saw it all and acted decisively. Without that whistleblower, none of this might have surfaced in time. As the scandal exploded, Keir Starmer disappeared from the public eye. No press conference, no real-time interviews, just a short, sterile, pre-recorded message that only added fuel to the fire. In it, he brushed off the court's decision as a misunderstanding, but the evidence told a different story, and the silence only made things worse. Inside the leaked documents, the strategy was laid out in chilling detail. Starmer's team planned to introduce EU-aligned measures slowly, repackaged as domestic reforms. Step by step, they aimed to rebuild EU infrastructure within Britain's legal system, until eventually full membership could be justified as a mere formality. It was a strategy built on patience and manipulation, hoping the public wouldn't notice until it was too late to turn back. But now, with the court's ruling and the leaks exposed, that entire plan lies in ruins. The slow re-entry to Brussels was supposed to happen quietly. Instead, it detonated right in Starmer's hands. Inside Labour, the fallout has been brutal. What began as a policy disaster has morphed into a full-blown leadership crisis. Shadow cabinet members are pointing fingers, backbenchers are leaking internal messages, and once loyal MPs are publicly calling for Starmer's resignation. The party, which had been rebuilding its credibility, is now staring down the barrel of collapse. And one senior MP, speaking anonymously, confessed the mood behind closed doors. He's toxic now. Every minute he stays, we bleed support. The panic is real. Some members fear the next general election could now be a historic defeat, not just for Labour, but for any hope of reclaiming trust with Leave voters. Leadership challengers are quietly assembling. Constituency offices are being flooded with angry emails and phone calls, and with protests growing outside Labour HQ, even Starmer's allies are struggling to defend what's left of his leadership. The damage isn't just political, it's personal. Voters feel tricked, party members feel betrayed, and Labour may not recover anytime soon. While Labour stumbled, Nigel Farage wasted no time stepping into the spotlight. With the instinct of a seasoned populist, he launched a nationwide campaign under the banner "Britain Betrayed." His message? Clear, brutal and effective. Starmer tried to sell out Brexit behind closed doors, and only the people can stop it from happening again. Farage began holding mass rallies across the country, releasing exposés online and teasing a traitor dossier filled with names, roles and alleged collaborators. Every speech he gave stirred louder applause. Every post sent his polling numbers higher. Reform UK, once dismissed as fringe, is now rising fast in national surveys. And it's not just his base cheering him on. Disillusioned Conservative voters and angry former Labour supporters are flocking to Reform, seeking what they see as the only party willing to defend sovereignty without compromise. Farage's timing couldn't have been sharper. In a crisis defined by secrecy, he's offering blunt clarity, and voters are listening. As British outrage intensified, a disturbing new layer emerged, one that stretched far beyond Westminster. Leaked files from Brussels confirmed what many feared. This wasn't just a solo operation. EU officials were not only aware of Starmer's hidden roadmap, they were quietly helping shape it. Directors described a British reintegration pathway, a plan crafted by EU policy teams to ease the UK back into alignment without triggering public resistance. No full accession talks, no public debates, just incremental influence sealed with handshake deals and bureaucratic tweak, and all of it relying on secrecy. Former EU officials, now speaking off the record, admitted informal talks had been ongoing for months. These weren't backroom chats, they were strategic sessions, carefully designed to exploit legal gaps and public apathy. Brussels wasn't just a passive partner, it was complicit. For many Britons, that revelation changed everything. The betrayal wasn't just domestic, it had international fingerprints. The EU was ready to welcome Britain back, not with a treaty, but through the side door. With the scale of the deception laid bare, attention quickly turned to the legal consequences. Could Starmer's actions be more than just unethical? Some constitutional experts think so. Legal scholars began combing through the evidence, and a troubling picture emerged. One where parliamentary consent was deliberately bypassed to enter into binding international commitments. Under British law, this could fall under misconduct in public office, a charge that carries serious weight. The Attorney General's office is now reportedly reviewing internal memos, emails and meeting records submitted during the court case. If prosecutors move forward, Starmer could face the unthinkable: a criminal investigation while still leading the opposition. Insiders suggest a formal inquiry could begin within weeks, and if charges are laid, it would mark a historic first. Never before has a sitting leader of the opposition faced legal action for subverting parliamentary processes. The fallout is no longer just political, it's personal, and it's legal. Just when it seemed the damage couldn't go deeper, whistleblowers from Labour's own policy team stepped forward, and what they revealed stunned even Starmer's critics. According to one senior aide, internal warnings had been raised for months. Staff told leadership the plan was legally risky, politically reckless, and guaranteed to backfire if exposed. But those warnings were ignored. In fact, the inner circle doubled down. Team members were allegedly told to avoid paper trails, switch to encrypted apps, and even discuss parts of the plan during outdoor walks to avoid surveillance. These cloak and dagger tactics might sound far-fetched, but digital forensics teams have already confirmed much of it. Time-stamped messages, deleted documents, and off-the-record meeting logs are now under review. And then came the Supreme Court's ruling, a constitutional earthquake. The justices didn't just strike down the plan, they issued a warning to the entire political class. Democracy is not optional, and sovereignty cannot be traded behind closed doors. It was a judgment that elevated the scandal from a political crisis to a defining moment in Britain's legal history, and the damage done may take years to fully understand. As Parliament scrambles to contain the crisis, the backlash is accelerating. Rishi Sunak has called an emergency session and is now pushing through the Sovereignty Protection Act, a sweeping law designed to prevent any future government from entering binding foreign agreements without full parliamentary approval and a public vote. It's moving fast, and early polls show massive public support. But even as the legal guardrails are being rebuilt, the political damage is spiralling. Starmer refuses to resign, drawing fierce comparisons to past leaders who clung to power in the face of collapse. Labour MPs are openly revolting, backbenchers are plotting leadership challenges, and voters are abandoning the party in droves. Across cities and towns, protests continue, and many Britons are vowing never to trust the establishment again. Internationally, the UK is under a microscope. Brussels has gone quiet, Washington is rethinking trade priorities, and across Europe, populists are holding this scandal up as proof that globalist elites can't be trusted. The betrayal, the cover-up, the court ruling, it has all combined into a storm that may redefine British politics for a generation. Keir Starmer's gamble failed, and now Britain stands at a crossroads. Either reclaim democratic control or risk watching it vanish again.